What's going on, partners? We're going to be taking a look at the California Board of State and Community Corrections. The board was established in 2012 by Governor Jerry Brown. He appointed Linda Penner as the chair to lead the board. She's been running the board with the agenda bestowed upon her in Proposition 47. Now, Proposition 47 was presented to the public as the Safe Neighborhoods and School Acts. The act required that states and counties conduct cutbacks in their criminal justice system, not only requiring to let inmates out of custody, but also transferring inmates to local counties to help with the overcrowdingness. On top of that, what they did was actually decriminalize California. Prior to Prop 47, if you committed theft and the amount was over $400, it was a felony. So you would go to jail. After a couple of thefts over $400 and you becoming a career thief, you'd probably end up doing some prison time. In present time, the amount is to $950. Now you can walk into Best Buy, pick up a PlayStation and a couple of games and still just commit a misdemeanor as long as the amount is under $950. That's why we see the increase in dash and grabs all over California. So this is how the state was fixing the prison overcrowding issue, not by rehabilitating the inmates, but by raising the threshold of the crime that they had to commit in order to go to state prison. So that brought the population down. This demonstrates the failure of the BSCC and the implementation of Proposition 47. Another failure of this commission is in the Title 15. Title 15 is the state's minimum standards. The BSCC does not have oversight or authority over detention centers. Instead, they're just an agency that sets down standards. That's it. They inspect facilities, and these facilities got to meet a minimum standard. One of their standards in Section 1050 is a classification plan. Now, I recommend that you pause the video and you read these 3 paragraphs, but we're going to stick to the first paragraph here. Each administrator of a temporary holding facility that should just say prison. Each administrator of a prison shall develop and implement a written classification plan designated to properly assign inmates to housing units and activities according to the category of sex, age, criminal sophistication, seriousness of the crime charge, physical or mental health needs. So we'll stop right there. This minimum standard basically requires each facility to have a classification plan for the inmates. Now, this is a problem because as far as jails, there's 125 jails in California. On top of that, there are 34 state prisons, 13 federal prisons, 35 camps, 47 juvenile halls. You have over 250 facilities, and each one is required to have their own classification plan. Now, thankfully, there are not that many because most agencies just come up with their own classification plan. For example, San Diego County has 6 different levels of classifications for the inmates in their custody. LA County breaks them down in minimum security, but they have 4 classifications. Medium security with 3 classifications, and maximum security with 2 classifications. So you have a total of 9 classifications for LA County. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations has 4 different levels of classification. So everyone's doing their own thing and everyone's classifying inmates a different way. Once the inmate is sentenced, and if his sentence is more than a year, he's probably going to go to state prison. And at the moment, I believe that the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation only has 2 reception centers where every inmate from all over California gets sent to one of these reception centers and spends a period of 60 to 90 days being processed. So you're having all these inmates from every county, from all types of classifications, being sent to one of 2 reception centers, which are both in Northern California. This is the furthest reception south, Wasco. Now, I want you to pay attention to the location. This is an issue because if you're from Southern California, Bakersfield is the cutoff. If you're involved in gangs, sureños are not supposed to be going up to Northern California past Bakersfield. That's where they drew the line. So we're sending inmates from Southern California to Wasco State Prison and putting them in danger because now they're being placed in a facility where their rivals are there, the norteños. And because there is this gray zone where they're not quite classified by the system yet, it is a war zone. It is a battleground. All right, let's listen to the story of this Wood who did 10 years in state prison, and he's going to tell us a little bit about reception.
And then I went to reception, which is a Wasco State Prison. It's in Central California. And I was only there a couple months, and it's kind of where they just assess you. They look at, what your crimes were, and then they got like a modifier system. What they'll do is they'll check. They got a point system. You reach so many points, you go 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 4, which is maximum security. They placed me at level 3 security, and the reception was kind of interesting because you get all these different counties come in from all over, and so you get all these different characters, and and then you branch out to all these other prisons. So it's kind of like an information network a little bit. You learn, who's doing what, where's where, who's going where. Everybody's always they got nothing better to do but keep track of everybody and what they're doing, who's going where. It's kind of it's an interesting thing right there. It's kind of like a super hub.
There's another problem because you're getting all these inmates from all over the county. It's creating an information hub, and they can relate hits, and they can send out information and communicate to each other all through the state. So these guys are communicating internationally. These guys are not only within prisons, but jails, from prison to jail, outside of states. These guys are communicating with gang members in Hawaii, in federal prison, because the system has unintentionally created a way for these guys to communicate and conduct their illicit activities.
Reception, one of the most dangerous prisons I've ever been in, was a reception, man, and I seen some crazy shit. See, they throw everyone of every level in the reception, so at any given time you could be housed right next to someone that's level 5 or 6, but no one's classified yet and transported. So it was always hectic as hell. I'm talking about crazy as hell. Is it like that in California? Do they house everyone of all levels together?
I just want to point out that this is a nationwide issue. This is not just a California thing. This guy was in a prison that's not even in California, and it sounds like his situation was even worse.
No, not necessarily the security. They kind of already have a rough idea. Like, so when I went to reception, they have dorm areas that you can recept in, and then they have cell areas. They sent me to the cell area, so they kind of already had an idea that I was going to be a higher level. So I didn't one of the lower level areas. But reception is dangerous for one thing, is because in California, if you are calling shots or if you're making moves and you make the wrong move, you have to answer for that. So in the reception center, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of in and out, there's a lot of gray areas. It's not really, there's not somebody there always basically making sure shit's done right.
Keeping tabs,
So say so-and-so's got a personal beef with so-and-so, they could smut that dude up at the reception center, and then they're going to get shot to a prison clear across the state. And then this guy gets shot. He made a move on this dude, or even just sent a couple missiles after somebody, and he won't even have to answer for the bad call. So there's a lot of shady shit that goes on in those reception centers as well.
All right, so I could tell that this guy's a real one because he tried to play it out like, hey, reception centers are not that bad. And then he just laid out a whole plot on what happens on a daily basis. This is the struggle for correctional officers on a daily basis. Plots and hits. These guys are making calls, backstabbing each other, running up debt, whether it's a drug debt, a gambling debt, just pissing off the wrong person. And it all happens inside these battlegrounds that we have unintentionally created because of policies like this. Old policies that don't work. Go ahead and check out the entire episode. His story is pretty cool, and it's going to give you some insight of the dangers that are happening inside of prisons that the government is not even addressing. Not only is this policy outdated, but agencies across the state are violating these policies. Listen to this.
So what they're doing is they're mixing inmates that are from general population with SNY inmates. Now, I heard that they were bringing SNY into general population yards, and I actually have a homeboy from my neighborhood. Shout out to the homeboy Sharky, man, from Dead End, that they actually put in Pelican Bay on an active yard, and he was on the other side, meaning he was non-active, okay? And immediately they got rushed. He got removed off that yard, and I mean, that's part of the game. That's gonna happen. When you're non-active, you gotta be on your toes, 10 toes to the concrete, because guaranteed these active authors are gonna handle their business. Now, I'm not gonna speak too much on the reasonings why.
So what CDCR is doing is that they're mixing up inmates. The state minimum standards, Title 15, requires that we separate them based on classification levels. But what the state is doing is they're mixing them. And it's not just happening in the state level. It's happening across California, across the nation, in an effort to consolidate prisons, in an effort to save money, in an effort to bring the inmate population down, and all kinds of other issues that have stemmed from these policies, from these outdated, unenforced policies.
In the free world, but watch out. So he gets at me and he tells me, he says, hey, gun trip out. What they're starting to do now is they're starting to take 5 active Southerners, 5 active Northerners, 5 active Africanos, or whatever the case may be, and throw them on these 50-50 yards or these SNY yards, right? And see, it's a plot and a plan that the administration has. You know, they formulated a plot thinking, okay, we need to get our budget up. Sounds good? That's first and foremost. And in order to have that extra budget, in order to have that overtime pay, in order to have those man hours, you know, to be compensated, they need some treachery on this yard.
All right, that's just some inmate conspiracy there on his part. Yeah, inmates are always going to blame the system. They're always going to blame, and it's a natural thing. You always blame that first line. I'm not going to say first line of defense, but that first line of contact. So this is a conspiracy situation that he's created, but that's neither here nor there. In reality, what's happening is that this board is not doing anything, to be honest with you. It's not enforcing, it can't enforce policies, it can't mandate agencies to do their own thing. And it's moving away from Proposition 47 because it hasn't been working. Everything's kind of blowing up in their face. Since the inception of this board, prisons have only gotten more and more dangerous. The problems that existed in 2012 are no longer the same problems that our correctional system is facing. When this administration began, 50-50 yards were rare. In present time, more than 70% of inmates are in 50-50 yard sensitive needy yards that fall under like protective custody and protective needs. Now, the protective needs is that's just a lie that 90% of inmates that are in protective need, they're just hiding out. They don't have any need. They just need the protective part of it. And there's other gang dropouts. But what has happened, and the reason that they've been dropping out, is because of the violence in general population was so bad that they have pushed out 70% of the population to these protective custody yards. And instead of these guys that got pushed out, instead of them saying, hey, we got pushed out, let's get along now, they created their own gangs that prey on the weak in those yards. And now they need protective custody. So we've just created a mess. The board puts all its videos on YouTube. You can go on YouTube, listen to every single video they've posted, and they will never talk about the injustices and genocides and overdoses that are happening inside of our prisons. They spent nearly 5 hours talking about nutrition. We don't have a nutrition problem in prison. We have a gang problem. We have a murder problem. 19 people died just in Riverside County, 2022. In 2023, 14 people died. And we're not even going to find out how many people died this year till probably next year, because the information and data and record keeping are outdated and obsolete. Like, I'm talking 1970 stuff. There is no way for us to know how many inmates are dying in each county, in each detention facility throughout the state of California. Look at these numbers with just one county. There is 52 counties in California. How many people do you think are dying? I believe that the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is on track to have the bloodiest year, is on track to have the most deaths, and it be the most violent this year, 2024. But we're not going to have up-to-date concurrent data till probably mid next year. And also imagine the amount of lives that we can save just by updating a minimum standard. And for those of you guys that say, oh, fuck these guys, they're just criminals, fuck them, they're the lowest of low. And especially if you're in law enforcement, you better check yourself, because your primary duty is to preserve and protect lives. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do better. And for now, partners, that's all I got. Let's hold the line and hold them accountable.